All right, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for our industry update. Mike Whatley from the National Restaurant Association has graciously stepped in to take over duties for this week for Melissa, who is on a well-needed vacation. Mike is with the National Restaurant Association. He is the VP of State and Local Affairs. He will be doing your presentation, overview of the national picture, things that are going on. If you do have questions, please use the chat feature, and I'm sure Mike will be able to address them at the end of his presentation. As always, please keep yourself muted during the presentation. We are recording this and we'll send this out. We're hoping that John will be joining us later today on the call, but please feel free to put in questions on a state level too, and we will field those questions at the end of the presentation. And if we aren't able to answer the questions, we will definitely get back to you later this week with the answers. And with that, I am going to turn this over to you, Mike.
Great, thank you. Thanks for letting me be on the call. It's hard to step in for Melissa, who does such a great job, but I'll do my best. And I was giving her a hard time earlier for having the audacity to take a vacation for the first time in a year. But here we are. So I'm going to go through at national level what we are seeing, federal level, and then I'm going to talk briefly about some state and local trends. Not going to delve in particular into any Pennsylvania specific issues because your team here knows them much better than I do, but just an overview of some of what we're seeing at the state and local level from a national perspective, if that makes sense. So you can go to our first slide. Great. So the Biden regulatory agenda. Needless to say, the Biden regulatory agenda is significantly different than the previous administration, the Trump regulatory agenda. The Biden regulatory agenda is much more similar to what you saw in the Obama administration. So for 2 terms of President Obama, you saw rules that were coming out that were difficult for the business community, like joint employer, which I'll get into in a second, and a higher overtime threshold. You then had the Trump administration come in and rescind many of those and push at times much more pro-business regulations. Now with the new administration, we're back to where we were 4 or so years ago, with an administration that's taking a somewhat challenging look at the business industry at times and a more pro-labor bent. And the president's been very upfront about how he's a very pro-labor union president. So a lot of what you're seeing in certain policy proposals reflects a lot of that. So 3 just to highlight, and I don't have a lot of clarity on any of these. None of us do, unfortunately, in terms of timing or what it might look like, but just 3 issues to place top of mind from a regulatory perspective. First, OSHA and what OSHA does at the national level in terms of a emergency temporary standard for COVID-19. The previous administration did not take a particularly aggressive or robust stance from an OSHA perspective in terms of standards in the workplace. There were lots of recommendations, but you didn't see a particularly onerous or rigorous standard being put out there by OSHA. The Biden administration has made it very clear they would like to put into effect some sort of more comprehensive OSHA standard. Candidly, we expected to see it earlier this week. We did not see it. So the timing is a little unclear in terms of what that looks like. If you're reading the headlines, the Biden administration, especially some of the scientists in the administration, are somewhat alarmed at what is happening at the state level in terms of COVID-19 regulations, specifically around mask mandates in certain states being rescinded. And there is potentially an appetite to push something at the national level that would require masks in workplaces. So when this was first coming to fruition, or when we first thought we might see a emergency temporary standard for OSHA related to COVID-19, we were very much looking at the California OSHA standard, which is by far the most rigorous and for the business community onerous OSHA standard in the nation as it relates to COVID-19 mask mandates, very specific requirements in terms of what happens if an employee tests positive. There's also a paid sick leave requirement in addition to California's existing paid sick leave law. There were several members of the Biden administration who've come from California. So our thinking was that we might see a standard similar to California. Again, it hasn't come to fruition yet. Timing is definitely a question mark. We thought we would see it by now, but it's certainly something to watch going forward in the next couple of days and weeks in terms of, is there a standard issue? Now, the hope would be that as the population continues to get vaccinated, we hopefully begin to put COVID and the pandemic in the rearview mirror in the next quarter or two, this becomes less of an issue. But in the interim, something to watch very closely. Second, the joint employer rule. For those of you who are in the franchise space, you know this well. The Obama administration rewrote many decades of case law on joint employer, the relationship in the franchisee and franchisor. That was changed under the Trump administration. We're now seeing the Biden administration talking about changing it yet again. So, there'll be legal challenges. There'll be all sorts of things like we saw under the Obama administration with a potential new joint employer rule. But this issue, which had moved in a very positive direction during the Trump administration, has come back to the front burner again at the federal level under the new administration. And then finally, and I have a question mark on this one too, revisit overtime regulations. So casting your mind back to the Obama administration, you saw the Department of Labor issue a much higher minimum salary threshold requirement for overtime in the late years of that administration. It was challenged by the business community and several Republican attorneys general, and ultimately struck down in court, so it never went into effect. The Trump administration proposed and put into effect a much more modest proposal related to increasing the minimum salary threshold. The new administration has indicated they're going to examine this again as part of the Department of Labor. So again, much like the OSHA standard, have a question mark next to this one in terms of timing. Would it just be increasing the minimum salary threshold? Would it be changing the duties test? We just don't know, but we're watching it very closely, and our team is engaging. We're several months into this administration now, so our team at the national level is very much engaging in relationship building. As political appointees are put into place and when needed confirmed, our team is there making those connections, as we do with every administration. We can move on to the next slide. So federal issues in Congress, going to go over 5 of these. Wage and RRF, I will have several slides for. Immigration, tax, and labor/PRO Act, I'm not going to have slides for. I'm just going to talk through them a little bit, because much like with the OSHA and overtime standards, especially on immigration tax, less is known right now than is known for wage and RRF. So if we can go to the next slide. Raise the Wage Act. So all of you are probably aware what's happening with the Raise the Wage Act. Raise the Wage Act was previously passed by the United States House in the prior Congress. It went nowhere in the United States Senate because Republicans controlled the Senate and because President Trump would have almost certainly vetoed it. Fast forward to the current state of politics in DC, the Raise the Wage Act was attached to the $1.9 trillion stimulus package that was recently signed into law. And I say attached in that it went through the House and was approved by the House, and the Senate parliamentarian, and not to get into arcane Senate rules, but the Senate parliamentarian basically said that the reconciliation process that was used for that bill, which basically means you only need 50 senators to vote in favor with the vice president casting the tie-breaking vote, meaning you don't need a single Republican senator to vote in favor to pass a bill. There are very strict rules attached to that. Whatever legislation you're passing with that has to meet strict budgetary requirements. And the Senate parliamentarian, who is a nonpartisan officer of the United States Senate, ruled the Raise the Wage Act could not be included as a part of that legislation, and it had to be stripped out. There was brief conversation in the Senate about amending the minimum wage component to potentially take away tax credits or tax breaks for large corporations that did not pay $15 an hour minimum wage. However, that did not come to pass, and the Senate just stripped the wage part out of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package entirely, sent it back to the House, and it was approved and signed by the president. So Raise the Wage Act was a hot topic. It did not become law because of what the Senate parliamentarian did. I would also point out that even if the Senate parliamentarian had ruled that Raise the Wage Act was in order, it is very unlikely that as written, the Raise the Wage Act would have passed. due to several moderate Democratic senators expressing extreme hesitancy towards what is included in Raise the Wage Act. Now, what is included in Raise the Wage Act? It would increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025, starting in 2026. It would index the minimum wage to median wages, and you can follow along on this spreadsheet on the top of the screen. But perhaps most importantly for the restaurant industry, the Raise the Wage Act would completely eliminate the tip credit. So it would take the cash wage for tipped employees from $2.13 to $15 an hour by 2027, at which point it would then be attached to the federal minimum wage and would go up as the federal minimum wage would. Obviously, this is would have a huge impact on the restaurant industry at a time when the industry can least afford it. So our team, I know PRLA, our state restaurant associations across the country, were pushing a message of, we're open to having a conversation about minimum wage, and perhaps the time is now, but now is not the time to jump to 15 and to eliminate the tip credit. This industry has seen 110,000 restaurants close in the last year, which is just astronomical in terms of the impact. We can't absorb this right now. This is not the right time. And that message was heard. So yes, it was, this bill did not pass because the Senate parliamentarian said it was not in order, but our industry's efforts were a large part of the conversation as well. Now, that is not to say it's time to declare victory and go home. This conversation's over. This issue, minimum wage, tip wage, youth wage, all of that is going to continue to be an issue. There was an article in Politico just this morning about how the Senate is looking at a compromise bill on wage, what that might look like. Our team is an active part of that conversation. I know the PRLA team is too. We're there, we're having a conversation about, let's have a productive conversation about wage. Let's figure out what works, but let's tie it to data and let's tie it to how our industry works. And eliminating the tip credit entirely is just not the way to do that. So we're out there telling our story, both in the press and also behind the scenes in lobbying meetings. But if this is an issue that you care a lot about, would encourage you to engage with PRLA, but also engage with us, the National Association. We need your story. We need your voices on this issue. If we can go to the next slide. So positive news in terms of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or RRF. So this was passed as part of the stimulus package and is a major win for the restaurant industry, and a huge testament to what has been done by restaurateurs across the country. Many of you engaged on this. PRLA engaged on this. We engaged on this. And there's just a whole chorus of folks engaging on the need for a restaurant-specific relief package. So back on March 18th, 2020, National Restaurant Association, in its really first letter on the coronavirus pandemic, encouraged the administration and also Congress to pass a direct and targeted financial relief program for the restaurant industry based upon our unique needs in the pandemic. As you all know, we were probably the first industry to be shut down, and we'll be one of the last to come back. Perhaps you could argue travel, tourism, airlines will be the last to come back, but restaurant industry is, we're right there in terms of being the last ones to come back. So we needed a targeted relief fund. Recently, with the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic shutting down restaurants, Congress did take action and the president did sign the overall stimulus package, which included the RRF as a part of it. So direct industry specific aid. Now, I might note, and I'm sure many of you utilized the Paycheck Protection Program, Part 1 and now Part 2. Those were essential down payments and really critical to making sure that restaurants were able to survive to now. 110,000 restaurants have closed in the last year, but the number would have been a lot higher had Congress not passed PPP1, PPP2, the ERTC, and a whole host of other issues. I know in Pennsylvania, you've seen state relief, you've seen cities taking action. So this really has been a comprehensive effort to make sure restaurants are able to survive, but capstoned at this point by the passage of the RRF. So if we can go to the next slide. So what does this actually include? So it establishes a $28.6 billion restaurant revitalization program, which will live within the Small Business Administration. I'm going to caveat the next couple of slides by saying that I am not the guru of the RRF at the National Restaurant Association. I know it very well. but Aaron Frazier on our team has literally lived this every hour of the day besides when he's sleeping for the past 2 months. So I'm happy to answer questions, but if you're asking super technical questions that I can't answer, I can get an answer for you from Aaron Frazier. We have also set up a mailbox on this, rrf@restaurant.org, where you can send all questions and we'll respond to them. Happy to answer any you may have, but just caveating, if I can't answer a super technical question, we will get you an answer as soon as we can. With that said, who's in and who's out? People who are in restaurants, food stands, food trucks, most likely almost all of you are in on this. Who's out? If you're a publicly traded company, or if you're a restaurant with 20 or more locations, you're out. But if you're a small franchisee, you're in, which is a great part of this program. This is going to be a big deal, but it's also going to take a little bit of time to set up. So if we can go to the next slide. So here's a slide that my colleague Aaron uses to explain kind of how the RRF will work in theory. And again, just take a minute to look at this, but I'll walk through it a little bit. So his example is basically a pancake house. They earned $1.2 million in revenue in 2019 with a $400,000 annual payroll. Important to note, they received 2 rounds of PPP loans. Under the RRF, overall, your grant is going to equal the gross receipts difference from 2019 to 2020. So basically your loss, but you're going to deduct PPP. If you got it round 1, if you're getting it round 2, you're deducting that from what you're getting. You don't have to deduct idle loans, which is important, but you're making that calculation, and that's going to determine the size of your loan. So for example, scenario 1, in 2020, your revenue was down 50%, which means you lost $600,000. Keep in mind, in this example, you had received $200,000 in PPP loans. So your loss is $600,000, but you received $200,000 in PPP. That means you're eligible for a $400,000 RRF grant. Not going to walk through all these examples, but you can see in these slides are also posted on our website, so you can see all of this. This just walks you through various examples of, based upon your losses and based upon how much, if any, PPP funding you receive, what you would be eligible for as a part of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We can go on to the next slide. So what does this look like from a timeline? So ARP, which was the bill, this was included in the $1.9 trillion stimulus package, signed into law March 11th. These are, don't take these to the bank per se in terms of timing. This is a rough timeline in terms of what this might look like. We expect SBA to release rules and applications sometime in the April timeframe. There is an early window, a 21-day priority for businesses who are women-owned, veteran-owned, or disadvantaged. They will receive the first ability to apply for these grants. And then in terms of open eligibility, we're looking at May or June of 2021. So bear with us. It's going to be a little bit of time here until the money's actually flowing, but know that our team is working very proactively with SBA and with other partners to make this as efficient and easy as possible. But it's a brand new law. It's a brand new program being set up. There are going to be some growing pains along the way. If we can go to the next slide. Now, let's remember, this is, as Aaron likes to say, the ink is still drying. So rules are going to get promulgated. You're going to see new guidance. We're in the early stages of this. So just a couple of pointers. Be careful before signing up with any vendor who pledges they know how to shepherd you through this process. This is a new program. It's never been done before, and the rules are being created right now. So if someone comes to you and says, I can guarantee you're going to get X from the RRF, be wary of that. Definitely do your due diligence. Also, to protect taxpayers and restaurants, the grant program is going to have a lot of scrutiny, regulatory, legislative, and also media scrutiny. So just be aware of that. They're working through the kinks. This is a work in progress. We have dedicated a page on our website, restaurantsact.com. It's up there /RRF. That is going to have all of our webinars up there, all of our one-pagers. If you forgot the email address to email, rrf@restaurant.org. It has that up there in big bold letters. We want to be a resource. We want to help you get the money you're entitled to. So please check that site back frequently. Please check with PRLA. They're going to be a fantastic resource for you in terms of figuring this program out. But be on top of it, be ready, but also be patient, because this is going to take some time to set up in terms of creating this program at SBA and the application process and all of that. So, stay on top of it, stay on our website, work with PRLA, but just be patient. If we can go on to the next slide, perfect. So 3 final issues: immigration, tax, and labor/PRO Act. Immigration reform, President Biden and Democratic leadership in Congress have made it very clear they would like to pass some sort of comprehensive immigration reform. You're starting to see more talk in the media about the situation at the border, what that looks like, which will put additional pressure on Congress to pass legislation. I don't have elaborate slides on this because the question becomes, where does this fit into the priority matrix? So, you have this stimulus package that's passed. You have talk about a major infrastructure package. You have talk about another major spending package. There's talk about environmental legislation. There's talk about immigration reform. There's talk about tax. All these different priorities, where do they fit in the agenda? And, if Congress is going to use the reconciliation process again, they can only do it one more time this year. So what are they including in that? How do they prioritize things? For something like immigration, they would almost certainly have to get Republican support. So what does that look like? Just have this on here to say, immigration reform is essential to our industry, and we are at the table being a part of the conversation. So much more to come, but we do expect immigration reform to be a major conversation in DC going forward. Tax, I have even less on tax. The previous president and Republicans in Congress would argue that the 2017 tax reform was one of their greatest accomplishments, if not their greatest accomplishment. President Biden and many congressional Democrats campaigned on repealing or reforming significant portions of that law. Haven't seen the details yet. You're seeing talk about how to pay for some of these infrastructure packages in terms of increasing taxes on corporations, increasing taxes on high income earners. So all of it's on the table. We're going to be there at the table. We're going to be engaging, much more to come. And finally, labor/PRO Act. The PRO Act is it's a very pro-union bill that makes it much easier to organize workplaces of various types across the country. It passed the House. It is now in the Senate. We think it is unlikely that the Senate will pass it, just given that they would need Republican support most likely, and Republicans do not like this bill. But this is something to watch because the PRO Act would make it much easier to organize a restaurant if it were to pass. Again, it's in the Senate now. Movement at this time seems unlikely. We've heard there could be a hearing on the bill sooner rather than later, but we're watching this very closely, and we'll provide any updates we have through PRLA as they come available. Next slide. So just wanted to flag, many of you have probably attended our public affairs conference in the past, which is a great in-person event. It is not in person this year. This will be virtual. This will hopefully be our only time it's virtual, but on April 20th, we are hosting the virtual 2021 Public Affairs Conference. We would love to have you join us. If you go to restaurantsact.com, you can sign up. It's a one-day event. I promise it will not just be a full day of Zoom. We have some pretty exciting stuff lined up. We have 2 keynote speakers, Rahm Emanuel on the Democratic side, and then Dana Perino on the Republican side. We've got a whole host of legislative speakers talking. We're going to have a fun cooking demonstration. We have a musical performance by the ex-ambassadors, which we're excited about. It's going to be a fun time and well worth your time. And it's important that you be a part of this process, that lawmakers hear from us, because so much is happening. So please join us if you can. More details at restaurantsact.com. Go to the next slide. State and local. We can go to the next one. Perfect. So just some policy issues to flag for everyone. And these are national. I'm not talking about what's happening in Harrisburg or what's happening in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, but just some things to highlight that are happening around the country. 4 headlines. First, Congress leaves state and local governments facing budget hole gaps. Yes and no. So this is the December headline. Congress passed state and local relief as part of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. So money was sent to the states, which is important and great. The states and localities have a lot more money now than they did back in December, but many states and localities are still claiming they're broke. So we're watching very closely states that are looking at doing things like taxing PPP loans or trying to raise property taxes, raise income taxes, pass soda taxes, pass beverage taxes. All of us on the table, we're watching it very closely. It's just something to keep an eye on. Secondly, lawmakers proposing protections for businesses over COVID-related lawsuits. We talked earlier about the California OSHA standard in terms of workplace safety. Kind of on the other side of the pendulum, you have certain states and localities that are looking to pass pro-business liability protections. Basically, the idea that if you followed state and local guidance at the time when an incident happened, that you would be covered from frivolous lawsuits. Congress had talked about passing liability reform. It's unlikely at this point, given all that's happened, but some states are taking action on this. The third headline is about trash. Environmental issues have been a big issue for the industry for years. And a lot of those local conversations were put on hold during the pandemic. They're all coming back. And why is that? Because during the pandemic, so much more takeout was generated, so much more delivery was generated, and that generates waste, be it recyclable, compostable or not. More plastic, more material is being generated. So you're now seeing cities taking a new look at what's being taken out of your restaurants, be it straws, be it cutlery, be it containers. All of that, is part of the conversation. And then finally, this new issue called right to recall, which is popping up in certain cities on the West Coast. It's this idea that if you as a business furloughed employees during the pandemic, and you're now in a position to bring back employees, that you need to first bring back your previously employed employees. You can't just go out and hire new people. You need to bring back your existing employees. This is mainly targeted at airports and hotels. I know PRLA is a lodging association as well, so something to keep in mind there. It hasn't really impacted restaurants to date, and this is really just happening at the local level in California, but this creates a whole host of new onerous regulations. Obviously, restaurants value their employees and want to bring them back when it's appropriate, but these regulations and these laws really tie the hands of businesses and make it tougher to bring employees back and to rehire folks. So we're watching this very closely. Next slide. It's my second to last slide. So challenges and opportunities at the state level. There's a lot of really awful stuff that's happening out there for the industry, both in terms of just business climate and also things are being pushed by government regulators, but there are also some real opportunities here. So first off, vaccine rollout. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity. The only way that restaurants will get back to their pre-pandemic levels of business is by having the vaccine rolled out to everyone and having herd immunity. We know that, you know that. The vaccine rollout started slow. There were definitely some hiccups. It's definitely sped up now. But our team has been very involved since the beginning in terms of pushing food service workers to be prioritized as high as possible at the state level. So we're continuing to push on that. Reopening standards and regulations, as long as the pandemic is here, you're going to continue to see states and localities regulate how businesses can actually operate in terms of distancing requirements, what sort of sanitization practices you have to do. So we've been very involved in that process since the beginning and will be for as long as it's there. We talked about several of these labor bills, but expanded leave, Cal OSHA-like mandates, hazard or hero pay, the idea of paying workers a higher level of an hourly rate if they're frontline workers. Primarily restaurant workers have not been included in these bills so far, but there are some cities in California that have examined giving either hazard or hero pay to restaurant workers, which means minimum wage plus a certain dollar amount. So we're watching those very closely. On the opportunity front, there's a lot happening. Local lawmakers, state lawmakers are very sympathetic to the industry and understand the challenges that are occurring. And so they're looking for ways to help. So we, working with PRLA and our other state partners, have been pushing, for any sort of relief at the state and local level, tax relief, regulatory relief, grants, tax credits, cocktails to go, making all of those permanent. All of these issues are on our agenda, and we're working with our state partners to push these forward in every single jurisdiction. And finally, last slide. Appreciate you all spending 30 minutes with me this morning. Would love to continue the conversation, but also encourage you to check out restaurantsact.com. I've mentioned it several times in this presentation. This is our grassroots hub. We are putting everything there, federal, state, local. So would encourage you to go there. My boss, Sean Kennedy, who's our executive vice president of public affairs, puts out a roughly once every week 90-second update in terms of what's happening in DC and why it matters to restaurateurs. So if you have not signed up for that, would encourage you to. You can go to restaurantsact.com and sign up at the very top of the page. We promise to not spam you too much, and you'll get really good and useful emails, and you can see what's happening in DC. So you've got a great team here in PRLA. We work great with John, Melissa, Ben. We love working with them, but keep on advocating. It's been a tough year, but we do feel that hope is on the horizon. We're hearing anecdotally that sales are starting to go up in many regions. Vaccine rollout's going well. So, it's been a challenging year, but we're optimistic about what comes next for the industry. But regardless, we will be here as your national partner to push for the best interests of the restaurant industry.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to put into the chat? If you don't, obviously he's provided with you with lots of opportunities to email and send out information if you have questions. Don't see any here. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Our webinar is not over. Ben is going to be taking over after Mike to talk a little bit more. But since we don't have any questions, if we do have some come up, we will definitely reach out to you, Mike, and try to get clarification at the end if we have any.
Great. Please reach out. If you have RRF questions, don't hesitate. rrf@restaurant.org. We will get back to you. You can ask the most technical question in the world, and Aaron will get back to you at some hour of the evening. So please ask those questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mike, for getting on this call with us today. Actually, if we can go to the next slide, Eric. I'm going to have Ben talk a little bit more. We've been talking about this Let PA Marry Us initiative, and I thought it'd be great for Ben to talk about what we've done, where it's going, and how you can get involved. We're hoping John will be getting on the call later on after Ben's off, so please stay on the call. As I said, if you have questions on a state level and you'd like to ask us, we will definitely field questions at the end to not replace Melissa, but try to fill the space that she usually fills today. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to you, Ben.
Thanks so much, Hope, and thanks, Mike, for joining us this morning. I just want to talk briefly about letpamarryus.com. The PRLA has been working with a couple other catering associations, NACE and PEP, in Pennsylvania to encourage Governor Wolf and locally, I'm in Philly, locally here in Philly, Dr. Farley, to ensure that the wedding industry and all indoor events can start opening safely at reasonable levels. We know that Wolf did increase the capacity a couple of weeks ago that will start on April the 4th. However, we're still not in a position where people can plan their larger weddings in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, when we know it's going to be safer. So this website, www.letpamarryus.com, is a really easy way to share with your customers and your clients and your friends just a little outline of what this industry brings to the state and brings to the hospitality community. On the website, there's an easy way to just click and send a tweet to Governor Wolf, or click and send an email, whether you're a wedding couple, family and friends, professional event planner, or an owner of a facility. So we are really encouraging people to, to share this and, use it. Tweet to the governor. Let them know that we need a roadmap. We are losing right now weddings and events to different states that are bordering us because they have opened up or provided a roadmap for reopening. It's heartbreaking when I'm hearing that people are losing events this fall just because the customers don't have the confidence to book the wedding or book the event. A lot of corporate events have been canceling, just because of lack of guidance from the state. So please share this widely. If you are an event person or a caterer on this call, please share it with your entire network, your entire mailing list. We've been sending it out in our daily updates. We know it's getting, thousands of emails a week being sent to the governor and his team. So, just please help us out here, and let's get this industry back rolling. These guys, we know hotels have hurt. We know restaurants have been hurting, but, they were able to pivot in some sense. And, restaurants were able to do takeout and delivery when we were completely shut down. A lot of these event professionals haven't had any helpline like that in the past 12 months. So all your support is appreciated. Thanks, Hope.
Thanks, Ben. Actually, there was a question that just came out for Philly regulations. I'm wondering if you would be able to, there's two in there for Philly, actually.
Sure. So Gretchen asked, is there any clarity for the Philadelphia regulations as to what the rules will be on 4/30/21 when we are allowed to open up? Gretchen. So, and then Leo said, following up on Gretchen's question regarding Philadelphia, Dr. Farley's announcement, meaning 11 p.m. last seating and meal mandate, are staying in place until the end of April. So let's talk about Philly for a second. So yesterday during Dr. Farley's press conference, we were told prior that they would have some exciting news to share. I have to tell you, it was not exciting. It was a huge letdown. It was one of my biggest disappointments of the year. So what he did say, we know that Governor Wolf announced 2 weeks ago that on April 4th, the food requirement with liquor would be lifted, the curfew would be lifted, bar seating would return. The events, indoor and outdoor events, would be increased minimally. And we were really hoping, because Philly is usually 2 to 3 weeks behind the state, that would give the city enough time to prepare and say, okay, let's start aligning with the state. I've been on calls with the health department every week. I have to tell you, it's my most frustrating call of the week. I never look forward to it. Last week was no exception, except that they said that they would be looking over the guidance from the governor and give us an update yesterday. So when Dr. Farley announced yesterday, he said that the city will not be aligning with the state. He is worried about the increased case count. However, we've seen the increased, a minimal increased case count happening throughout Pennsylvania and the Northeast. But with the influx of all the vaccinations right now, I'm not sure, why he made that decision. But so he said that the only things that they're going to be doing starting April 4th would be to increase outdoor events to 250 people. And they would allow some type of food service to be provided for business meetings in hotels. None of the actual guidance has been updated on the website, so we don't even know what that looks like at this point. So I can only repeat, what he told us. He did say, Gretchen, he did say that they will revisit and have a better idea April 30th. He did not, however, say that these restrictions would be lifted on April 30th. So again, he did mention outdoor, indoor events and outdoor events. We were asking for a roadmap. A roadmap means give us a day when we can start doing stuff, not give us a day where we may or may not lift these restrictions. He did say that if the case counts are trending down, that would be where he would, begin lifting the restrictions. What we don't understand is that there's 66 other counties in the state that have are lifting these regulations and these mitigation efforts. The State Department of Health is following the CDC guidelines. They're doing everything by the book. We don't understand why Philly should be treated any differently. A dining room at 75% capacity in Altoona has the same density as a dining room at 75% capacity in Philadelphia. Dr. Farley always brings up the fact that density is a reason why Philadelphia should be treated differently. I don't think his argument holds any water. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. And the enhanced ventilation standards to get certified to 50% right now in Philadelphia, it's still at 1.3% of all Philadelphia restaurants have been certified. It's absurd. It's not fair. It's not easy to qualify. And again, we're seeing all across the state that restaurants are doing this safely. So I don't know what to tell you guys. If you'd asked me yesterday what was going to happen, and a couple people did, and I would have lost a lot of bets, but I would have been, I was for sure thinking that he was going to at least lift the curfew, get rid of the food mandate, a food requirement. We're working on something with the bar seating, because there are places in Philadelphia that have been approved by the health department to already have counter seating. So there's no reason why everybody shouldn't be approved if there's already people approved. Reach out to the health department if you want to get yourself certified or approved, I guess. So anyway, we're very frustrated about that. Another question just came in. For clarification, adding F&B to indoor business meetings is only applicable to hotels come 4-4 in Philly. No other venues such as museums or other arts and cultural are included. We don't know. He did specifically say hotel, although I spoke to a couple private clubs yesterday who are hoping that they will be under the same guidance, but again, we're going to have to wait and see. So they have till April 4th to put up the new guidance. Hopefully it comes sooner than later. Also, the state guidance, we're not sure when the state guidance is up. So we don't know any of the particulars quite yet. I mean, we would hope that they follow the same guidance that was issued prior to July 15th of 2020. So hopefully that's the deal.
And I did see that John is on the call.
Hey, good morning, John.
Hey, Ben, on that last point about the guidance, well, first, thank you all for attending today. I'm sorry that I was late getting with you. I'm sure you had a great time without me, though. We specifically talked about the FAQs that are related to the April 4th opening for the, in particular, restaurants. But I will, before I mention that, I will say much of the conversation had to do with expanding the indoor capacity for private events, because I know that's such an issue, and I'll get to that in a moment. We should have some idea of the timeline for when the FAQs will be developed over the next 24 to 48 hours, and we'll probably get a preview of what's going to be in them. The assumption that they're going to be the same as the green standards back prior to the July 15 shutdown is what most people have been going by, but you really can't count on that until the FAQ is done. And for example, there is right now a requirement that you have to be in a seat to consume food or beverage in a restaurant or a bar. Or I should say there was back in the green standard, and I think it's still in place. We don't know whether that's going to be continued, but I suspect it will. And for the venues, the outdoor venues that are on here, we did bring up the point that for outdoor venues like festivals and ball games and things like that, the food and seat requirement probably isn't as necessary as it might be inside, and they are going to at least consider that. Secondly, what's really important, and many of you have been asking about this, is for bar seating, will bar blocks or bar barriers still be allowed in lieu of social distancing? That hasn't been put into the new FAQ yet. We lobbied hard for it, in particular, since there was a lot of research done when it was allowed the first time by one of the deputy chiefs of staff. And a lot of investment has been made in bar blocks and bar barriers. We hope to have an answer on that, hopefully by the end of the week. Again, this takes effect a week from Sunday. And then there's still not a calculation for outdoor seating where there's no fire code. They're working on that as well. And those are probably the big things that came up in this discussion. There was and I'm going to answer a couple of the questions here, Ben, while you rest for a moment, and then I'll turn it back to you. And then we talked a lot about indoor capacity, and I explained, and I think if they didn't get it before, they get it now. When the original green standards were developed, we worked closely with the administration on it, and there was a distinction between private events with food and beverage and let me call them public events. We're supportive of public events having larger capacities too, but there's a big difference when you know everyone that's on the guest list at a private event with food and beverage, like a wedding or something like that. And I explained the frustration the private events industry has because they feel like they've been unfairly grouped in with so-called public events, and they should be considered differently, more like a restaurant. We made a good case on that. I believe they're going to work on that as a potential option, but there's definitely not going to be any change for the April 4th guidelines. They also understand that when they amend the indoor private events guidelines to allow them to operate at a higher capacity, there needs to be as much notice as possible so that you can confirm wedding counts and things like that for private events. So that was a big part of our discussion. The other thing that I did want to mention, Allison asked about Allegheny County. I don't know about Allegheny County, Allison, except that I know that when we worked with Rich Fitzgerald on the closures that took place in Allegheny County, he really wanted to get to the point where Allegheny consistently would align with the state for obvious reasons. So I'd be surprised if they don't continue that alignment. But again, Dr. Bogan, like Dr. Farley, has a lot to do with the decisions that are made in Allegheny County. I don't know more than that right now. Someone else might know more about that. And then Maggie asked about the face covering guidance that came out that essentially said if all parties are fully vaccinated, they would be safe to be in a group setting without face coverings. I don't think that's going to apply to restaurants in the foreseeable future, just because it's hard to ensure that all parties have been vaccinated. And then secondly, you've heard me say this before, is the state of Pennsylvania has never been more lenient than the CDC guidelines. So when you say, will we go to 3 feet social distancing for restaurants? In my opinion, they won't until the CDC does. Now, the CDC did recommend 3 feet for schools, but they did not say anything about restaurants. So I wouldn't expect that to happen in Pennsylvania until the CDC amends their guidelines. There is some talk, I believe, at the CDC and in Pennsylvania about social distancing for things like outdoor and indoor sporting events that maybe should be different than 6 feet. Because those of you who represent venues know it's very difficult to get anywhere near the allowed capacities now with 6 foot social distance at sporting events. So that's what we learned today. All of the things are being seriously considered and worked on right now, and we should have some further guidance over the next few days. And I don't know when there'll be another announcement about private events. As I said, nothing's going to change before the 4th, but I really think whatever announcement does come, you'll get plenty of notice about it so that those events you have on the books, you'll be able to hopefully keep on the books. So Ben, that's everything I know relative to the things that have come up thus far. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks. I just want to, there's another question that came in from Donnie. Hey, Donnie. Philadelphia, is it written anywhere that tables can't be pushed against the bar? Donnie, it's not there's no guidance that says one way or another on that. Anecdotally, I know that if a table is against the bar, it should still have 6 feet of distance from like employees. So I wouldn't push it right up against the bar. Further, they don't want bartenders reaching over the bar and handing it to the guest at the table. The bartender or server would have to walk around the bar and actually get closer to the guest. Their rules, not mine. However, you know, I see, and I've been encouraging a lot of people to do that in order to get more, you know, help them get to 25% indoors or help them to get to 50% indoors by using that. I know there has been a couple health inspectors that go around and say that that's not allowed. However, it's not written anywhere that it's prohibited.
Great, thanks, Ben. We can go through the rest of the slides, and then at the end, we'll address the rest of the questions. Maybe John and Ben can take a look at them and tag team a little bit there. Again, we are having our chapter meetings, and please take time to get involved with these meetings. I think it's a great way for you to be networking with the regional other owners and operators in your regions, and, you know, working to help with understanding what's going on with your business and their business, and seeing if you can help each other through this whole process. Next slide. We will be back next week. Melissa will be back. She promises us that she's coming back on the 31st to do her webinar. And we will be having webinars in April. They are up on our website, but we will continue this through April because we know additional information will need to be disseminated. At noon today, Brinker Simpson's is having a webinar about the RRF. They're going to be discussing the bill, the critical components. So if you have time, jump on that. NRA is also doing an OSHA compliance webinar tomorrow, and you know that Mike touched upon this. They're going to be talking about the strategies to be in compliance with the ever-changing guidance coming from the CDC and OSHA. So I think it could be a very valuable webinar to check out. As always, they do record these, so you could get a recording of it if you can't attend it. And then the PA Tourism Office will be having a webinar on Friday to discuss the survey results about the Economic Indicators Report. So today is the Great American Takeout. So please visit our website. There's media kits. Every post, the sponsors will donate $10 towards the CORE and NRAEF. So please take a time to check that out. Steph just put it up on our chat. Carry Out PA is obviously a very important piece to this, so make sure that you're all up to date on that. And we are awarding this Friday our third round of HARP applications, so please make sure to let all your customers know the importance of supporting HARP and doing the text to donate and fundraising for us. And as always, our scholarship, it's open until next week. Please let students know. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our future of our industry. Our SurSafe classes are running. We do have a full schedule for April, so check that out. And for virtual experiences, if you have anybody in your business or if you would like to take part in that, please let me know. Our students are still working remotely on various days, so these virtual experiences are an important part to their education. And with that, I don't know, John and Ben, if you want to tag team.
One more question came in, Hope, and that has to do with the guidance about that's coming out of the CDC about small groups that are fully vaccinated can get together without a face mask. The question is there any indication that is from Kate that face masks will not be applicable for private events like weddings if everyone can provide record of being fully vaccinated? The answer to the question is no, there's no indication. I'd be surprised if that's in the foreseeable future, just because the guidance that came out of the CDC is really for small groups, and they really defined it as small groups. And I'm not sure this is what they're visualizing. It certainly would be a nice way to connect the dots, but there is no guidance thus far on that we know of. I think the rest of it is just thanking Ben, rightfully so, for the great work that he's doing in Philadelphia. Thank you, Ben. I mean, it's you can tell how difficult the job is for him, and we appreciate the fact that he's there on the street every day, trying to help the 7,000 restaurants and several hundred hotels that are there.
Well, thank you everybody for taking it easy on us. I thought we might get more questions coming through, but you know, as always, if you have questions, please reach out to the staff. We're here to help. And we will do what we can to get the answer to you as quick as possible. Thanks, Ben, for doing that great presentation on and taking all the Philly questions, and John for jumping on. As always, we've recorded this and we'll send this out. John, I don't know if you have any parting words or if
I don't. Thank you, Hope, for covering and coordinating everything today.
Oh, and
And,
thank Mike Whatley. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
And Mike Whatley, I don't know that Mike's still there, but
I don't know.
I know Mike well enough to know he probably did a great job, and I thank him for helping us this week. And thanks to all of you for continuing to tune in each week and for your loyal support. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great day.